I've already called the police.
They're coming to arrest you right now. The HOA president is screaming in my face, her phone trembling in her hand, mascara running in black streaks down her flushed red cheeks. All because I refused to tear down my grandfather's 103-year-old cabin sitting on my own property.
You think your little FBI badge scares me? My husband has real connections. You just messed with the wrong family.
Oh, lady, you have no idea how wrong you are. 2 sheriff's cruisers come screaming up my driveway, lights flashing red and blue, sirens blaring. They're here to cuff me, the dangerous federal agent, supposedly terrorizing this poor, innocent woman. But in about 60 seconds, she's going to wish she'd never hit dial on that 911 call. Drop your wildest HOA or Karen meltdown stories in the comments and tell me what state you're watching from, because this level of crazy can't just be Montana. Let me tell you how this psycho tried to steal my family's century-old legacy with a clipboard and a fake smile. I'm Senior Special Agent Garrett Blackwood, 28 years with the FBI's Cybercrimes Division. After my divorce went final last spring, I inherited my grandfather's hunting cabin on Whitefish Lake, Montana, a place that's been in our family since 1923. We're talking hand-hewn logs weathered to silver gray, a fieldstone fireplace big enough to roast a deer, and a dock where 3 generations of Blackwood men learned to fish. The cabin sits on 2.5 pristine acres. Every morning, mist rises off the lake like smoke, and the smell of pine pitch and wood ash hits you like a shot of pure Montana. You hear loons calling across still water, and when you run your palm along those century-old timbers, the bark feels like sandpaper worn smooth by 100 winters. After 18 months of divorce hell, this place was my salvation. Every Friday evening, I'd escape federal courtrooms for something real, coffee that tasted like mountain water instead of courthouse vending machine swill, a place where my grandfather's spirit still lived in every creak of the floorboards. Then the HOA vulture landed on my dock. Brunhilde Bryn Ashford, 52 years of California entitlement wrapped in a tennis outfit she probably sleeps in. Moved here 3 years ago and immediately appointed herself Montana's Martha Stewart. She drives a BMW X5 that's cleaner than most operating rooms and carries a clipboard like it grants her dominion over working people's lives. That September morning, I'm having coffee on my dock, watching eagles hunt over the water when I hear the sharp click-click of heels on wooden planks. She's marching toward me like she owns the place, which turns out to be exactly what she thinks. Agent Blackwood. Not a greeting, a declaration. Bryn Ashford, president of Whitefish Estates Homeowners Association. Her perfume cuts through clean mountain air like diesel exhaust. She's scanning my grandfather's cabin with the look of someone who found a cockroach in her champagne. Your property has significant compliance violations that require immediate correction. Violations. My family's heritage violates her standards. She starts pointing that manicured talon, peeling chinking between logs, my grandfather's perfectly stacked woodpile, the '87 Ford pickup that's been in the family longer than her marriage. Everything authentic about this place offends her suburban sensibilities. Whitefish Estates maintains strict aesthetic standards, she announces, producing a thick packet. Standards that protect our community's exclusive character from incompatible elements. The way she says incompatible elements while looking at my flannel shirt makes her meaning crystal clear. People like me don't belong in her rich people's playground. 47 pages of pure harassment disguised as emergency compliance orders, $15,000 in demanded improvements, new roof, professional landscaping, complete restaining, hidden parking. Basically, erase everything that makes this place authentic Montana. This lakefront community attracts a very particular caliber of resident, she continues sweetly. People who understand that maintaining property values requires sacrifices from those who wish to remain. Then comes the kicker. These violations must be corrected within 15 days, not 30. Your property's current condition poses an immediate threat to neighborhood standards. 15 days to renovate a century-old cabin that predates her precious HOA by 85 years. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable somewhere that better suits your background, she suggests, with a smile sharp enough to gut fish. That's when I notice the wedding ring, a diamond cluster that probably cost more than my annual salary. Makes me wonder what kind of man finances this level of cruelty, and whether he knows his wife spends her days destroying families for sport. I'll review your requirements, I say, keeping my voice federal agent neutral. She beams like she just conquered territory. Wonderful. I'm confident that once you understand our community's vision, you'll either embrace our standards or find somewhere more suitable. Click, click, click back down my dock, leaving behind the stench of overpriced perfume and pure malice. Right then, watching her BMW disappear down my road, I should have known this woman was going to declare war on everything I held sacred. I just didn't realize yet that she'd picked a fight with the wrong federal agent. Bryn wasn't bluffing about those 15 days. 72 hours later, I'm opening my mailbox to find a certified letter thick enough to choke a moose. Final notice of violation, stamped in red ink across the top, like I'm some deadbeat who forgot to pay his taxes. Inside, she's threatening $500 per day in fines starting immediately, plus legal fees, plus a lien on my property if I don't comply with her ridiculous demands. $500 a day, for owning a cabin that was here before she was born. But here's where this woman's arrogance becomes her downfall. She's so drunk on her own power, she never bothered to check the one thing that actually matters: whether her precious HOA has any legal authority over my property. While she's busy playing dictator, I'm spending my Saturday in the basement of the Flathead County Courthouse, breathing in that musty smell of old records and decades of forgotten bureaucracy. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead like dying insects while I dig through boxes of documents that haven't seen daylight since the Carter administration. That's when I find it, buried in a file folder marked Land Patents, 1920 to 1925. My grandfather's original deed, signed and recorded in 1923. The legal description matches my property exactly, and there's something beautiful written in faded ink that makes my heart race. Said property shall remain in perpetuity under original territorial land grant provisions. You know what that means in plain English? My cabin has grandfathered property rights that trump every regulation, zoning law, and HOA rule ever written for this area. I learned this trick years ago investigating real estate fraud cases. Always check the original chain of title because developers love to ignore inconvenient legal facts. But I keep digging because 28 years of federal cases taught me you don't just find one piece of evidence, you build an absolutely bulletproof case. The coffee from that courthouse vending machine tastes like it was brewed during the Nixon administration, but I'm too excited to care. Because buried in another folder, I find the Whitefish Estates HOA incorporation documents from 2019. And right there in black and white, said covenants specifically exclude pre-existing structures and historically designated properties from compliance requirements. This woman has been threatening me with rules that literally don't apply to my property, using authority she legally doesn't possess. I'm sitting there in that basement, surrounded by dust motes dancing in fluorescent light, when it hits me. Bryn just committed extortion. Demanding money through false legal threats is a federal crime, and I've got the paper trail to prove it. Monday morning brings the real revelation. I start visiting neighbors who received similar harassment, and suddenly I'm looking at a much bigger picture. Mrs. Sterling, 83 and sharp as a razor, shows me her violation notice for an unauthorized vegetable garden. She's been growing tomatoes in the same spot for 15 years, and now it's suddenly a visual nuisance requiring immediate removal. She told me people from my background should understand that certain activities belong in certain neighborhoods, Mrs. Sterling says quietly, her hands steady as she pours tea. Said my garden makes the area look like a refugee settlement. There's the discrimination I suspected, wrapped in polite language but ugly as sin underneath. Down the street, the Morrison family got hit for their children's swing set. Playground equipment not approved by architectural committee. Their kids have been playing on that set for 2 years without a single complaint until Bryn decided they didn't fit her vision. Then there's Jim Hartley, retired Navy veteran being fined for flying his American flag incorrectly. Apparently the pole height violates some fictional regulation about uniformity of patriotic displays. The pattern's crystal clear now. She's targeting older residents, working families, and anyone who doesn't look like they belong in her country club fantasy. Classic predator behavior. Isolate the vulnerable. Attack when they're least able to fight back. That's when Bryn makes her first major tactical error. She schedules an emergency HOA meeting for Thursday night to vote on enhanced enforcement measures against persistently non-compliant properties. Sends invitations to the entire neighborhood except her targets. Classic mistake of underestimating your opposition. Wednesday evening, we're all gathered around my kitchen table. The smell of Mrs. Sterling's homemade cookies mixes with coffee and wood smoke from the fireplace while we plan our counterattack. She thinks we're isolated, Jim says, his military training showing as he spreads out everyone's violation notices like battle plans. Classic divide and conquer strategy. Mrs. Sterling nods, adding honey to her tea. Bullies always assume their victims will stay silent and fight alone. I pull out my courthouse discoveries, the grandfathered property rights, the HOA's own exclusionary language, the evidence of systematic harassment. Tomorrow night, Bryn expects to steamroll a few helpless neighbors into submission. Instead, she's about to learn that her victims spent the week building a federal case against her. Thursday night, Bryn's emergency HOA meeting goes exactly as she planned, which means it's a complete railroad job. I'm parked across from the community center, engine running, watching through the windows as neighbors file into what's basically a kangaroo court. The parking lot's packed with luxury cars because apparently only people who drive German engineering get to vote on destroying working folks' property. 23 minutes. That's how long it takes them to vote my cabin a public nuisance and authorize immediate legal action. I can see Bryn through the window, pointing at blown-up photos of my property while her expensive attorney nods along like a bobblehead. Cars start streaming out, and I catch fragments of conversation through open windows. Property values, safety concerns. About time someone took action. The taste of bile rises in my throat. These people just voted to steal my family's legacy based on lies, and half of them probably don't even know what they voted for. But while Bryn's playing small-town dictator, I've been conducting real police work, and what I discovered makes her harassment look like amateur hour. Having FBI access to federal databases comes in handy when someone declares war on your family. So I did what any good investigator does. I looked into who exactly I'm dealing with. The results made my coffee go cold. Brynhilde Ashford has quite the resume. 3 years ago, she was running identical scams in a Sacramento subdivision. Same tactics: manufacture violations, target vulnerable homeowners, force property sales. The California HOA ended up dissolving itself after facing 17 different lawsuits she'd generated. Here's the kicker. Every single property she forced into foreclosure got purchased within months by Pinnacle Development Group. Same company, same pattern, too consistent to be coincidence. But the real bombshell comes when I run her husband's background check. Marcus Ashford, FBI special agent, transferred to Helena 6 months ago, assigned to Financial Crimes Unit under me. The man's been sitting in my Monday morning briefings while his wife plots to steal my property. I'm staring at his personnel file in my home office. The irony so thick you could cut it with a chainsaw. Marcus is solid, quiet, thorough, does excellent work tracking money laundering operations. Never mentioned his wife's activities, but honestly, would you advertise that your spouse terrorizes neighborhoods for a living? This creates a massive ethical problem. I can't use federal resources for personal vendettas, but I also can't ignore potential interstate fraud happening under my nose. So I start building a case the old-fashioned way: documentation, surveillance, and patience. Friday morning brings Bryn's next power play, and it's a doozy. I'm barely through my first sip of coffee when she marches up my driveway with the county building inspector trailing behind her like a whipped dog. "Surprise inspection," she announces, that fake smile bright enough to blind aircraft. The county received multiple reports about structural hazards requiring immediate assessment. The inspector looks like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. Keeps glancing at Bryn for cues while she records everything on her phone like she's directing a documentary about governmental overreach. "Foundation issues," he mumbles, pointing at corners where my cabin's been solid for a century. "Electrical concerns," he adds weakly, examining wiring that passed inspection 5 years ago. The whole performance reeks like month-old fish, and I'm capturing every moment on security cameras positioned around my property. That's when the inspector makes his fatal mistake. While Bryn's busy photographing my perfectly legal woodpile, he pulls me aside with sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Listen," he whispers, voice shaking like autumn leaves. "She offered me $1,000 to write you up for violations. Cash. But your place is solid, man, rock solid. I got kids, but I ain't gonna lie on official documents." Bingo. Attempted bribery of a public official, conspiracy to file false reports, abuse of governmental process. Bryn just escalated from harassment to federal felony territory. The inspector leaves without filing anything, but Bryn's already crafting her next attack. That afternoon, a notice appears in my mailbox from the county health department claiming anonymous reports about my septic system threatening lake water quality. Anonymous. Sure, I'm certain it has nothing to do with the woman who spent the morning trying to bribe county employees. By evening, she's posting flyers around the neighborhood. Emergency, protecting our lake from environmental contamination. She's trying to turn my neighbors against me by claiming my family's cabin is poisoning their drinking water. The audacity burns like acid in my chest, but I keep documenting everything. Because Bryn doesn't understand that every escalation she attempts gives me more ammunition for the federal case I'm assembling. She thinks she's strangling my property rights with red tape and false reports. What she's actually doing is building her own federal prison, one crime at a time. Monday morning, Bryn declares total war. And I mean full-blown, career-ending, destroy everything nuclear war. I'm in my Helena office, halfway through analyzing cryptocurrency fraud patterns, when my supervisor's shadow fills my doorway. Blackwood, Internal Affairs needs to see you. Now! Those words hit like a punch to the gut. In 28 years of federal service, Internal Affairs only calls when an agent's career is about to implode, or when someone's made it look that way. The complaint's sitting on the IA director's desk like a loaded gun. Someone filed detailed allegations that I'm systematically abusing federal authority to intimidate law-abiding citizens, and using FBI databases for personal vendettas against community leaders, complete with photographs, witness statements, and a timeline showing my supposed escalation from verbal threats to criminal harassment. Administrative leave effective immediately, the director says, sliding my badge and weapon across the desk. Standard procedure while we investigate. The hallway fluorescent lights buzz overhead as I walk out, the sound drilling into my skull like an angry wasp. 30 years of building a reputation, gone in 30 minutes because some HOA tyrant decided my family's cabin threatened her real estate schemes. Driving home through winding mountain roads, my knuckles are white on the steering wheel. Not from fear, from pure, crystallized rage. Bryn just tried to destroy my entire career because I won't surrender my grandfather's legacy to her greed. If she thinks one anonymous complaint will break me, she seriously miscalculated who she's messing with. That afternoon, I'm sitting on my dock trying to process the magnitude of what just happened when I hear boots crunching on gravel. Marcus appears around the corner, looking like he'd rather face armed terrorists than have this conversation. "Agent Blackwood," he starts, then catches himself. "Garrett, we need to talk." The October wind carries the sharp scent of dying leaves mixed with lake water. Marcus settles beside me on the wooden planks, both of us staring across water that reflects gray clouds like a broken mirror. "My wife's been intense lately," he says carefully, choosing words like he's defusing a bomb. "About neighborhood issues. She mentioned there might be some kind of dispute involving you." I watch his face, genuine confusion wrestling with growing dread. Marcus has no clue his wife just attempted to end my career, and I can't reveal the extent of her crimes without compromising the case I'm building. "She's certainly passionate about community standards," I manage, keeping my voice level. Marcus winces like he tasted something sour. "Look, whatever's happening between you two, I want you to know it won't affect our professional relationship. I believe in boundaries. He's trying to do right by everyone, and I respect that integrity. But what he doesn't realize is that his wife's escalation may have already shattered those boundaries beyond repair." That evening brings Bryn's most vicious attack yet. Mrs. Sterling calls me, sobbing so hard I can barely understand her words. "She brought strangers to my door," Mrs. Sterling whispers through tears. "Said they were federal agents investigating suspicious foreign nationals who might be living here illegally." My vision goes dark red. Bryn just impersonated federal officers to terrorize an elderly naturalized citizen. That's not harassment. That's a federal felony with serious prison time. I drive straight to Mrs. Sterling's house, where she shows me business cards the fake agents left behind. They look official to untrained eyes, but they're obvious counterfeits to anyone in law enforcement. Wrong fonts, incorrect agency seals, fake badge numbers. "They wanted to see my citizenship papers," Mrs. Sterling says, hands shaking as she sets down her teacup. The porcelain clinks against the saucer like chattering teeth. "Said neighbors complained about foreign influences disrupting community values." The calculated cruelty steals my breath. Bryn is so desperate to acquire my property that she's weaponizing racism and immigration fears against innocent people. But her biggest tactical error isn't the fake badges or even the internal affairs setup. Her biggest mistake is assuming she can terrorize people into silence while leaving a paper trail that leads directly to her doorstep. By Thursday, I've documented a federal prosecutor's dream case: bribery, conspiracy, false reports, impersonation of federal officers, civil rights violations, and systematic harassment. Each crime escalates the potential sentences, and together, they paint a picture of organized criminal activity. Friday brings the final piece of evidence I need. Digging through county records, I discover Bryn's been filing Freedom of Information Act requests for my personnel files, financial records, even sealed divorce documents. She's been building a dossier while planning her character assassination. That evening, my phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Federal agents can have accidents around mountain lakes, stop interfering with community progress, or learn firsthand. Screenshot captured and immediately uploaded to secure servers. Threatening a federal agent's life just upgraded Bryn's situation from harassment to domestic terrorism. She thinks she's cornered me with escalating attacks on my career and safety. What she's actually done is provide overwhelming evidence for the federal case that's going to destroy her life. Saturday morning, I'm drinking coffee that tastes like victory when I stumble across the document that changes everything. My kitchen table's covered with papers: HOA bylaws, county records, financial disclosures. When I flip to page 47 of the incorporation documents and nearly choke on my coffee. Buried in legal jargon designed to put people to sleep, there's a clause that makes my blood run cold. Original developer retains right of first refusal on all lakefront properties should controlling interest transfer to authorized development entity. I read it 3 times before the implications hit like a freight train. Whoever controls 51% of the HOA board can force any lakefront owner to sell their property at assessed value to a predetermined buyer, not market value, assessed value, which means pennies on the dollar for prime lakefront real estate. The predetermined buyer? Pine Summit Development, LLC. My hands are shaking as I spread out more documents across the wooden table, the papers rustling like autumn leaves in the morning breeze. Because suddenly, every piece of Bryn's harassment campaign clicks into place like a puzzle solving itself. Pine Summit owns the law firm that's been threatening me. Pine Summit's been paying HOA legal expenses that exceed our community's entire budget by 400%. And my cabin, my grandfather's 2.5-acre legacy, represents 40% of the shoreline footage they need for their $50 million resort development. Without my property, their entire project dies. But here's where it gets criminal. Following the money trail deeper, I find payments that make my 30 years of investigating financial fraud sing with recognition. Pine Summit paid Flathead County Planning Director James Morrison $15,000 in consulting fees 3 months before our HOA was incorporated. The same Morrison who expedited their development permits and conveniently overlooked my grandfather's territorial land grant protections. Property tax assessments for targeted families, Mrs. Sterling, the Morrisons, Jim Hartley, all increased exactly 300% this year. The financial pressure designed to force sales to, guess who? Pine Summit's subsidiary companies purchasing distressed properties at foreclosure prices. Even Sheriff's Deputy Rodriguez, who responded to Bryn's false reports about me, has his department's new patrol cars courtesy of Pine Summit's $50,000 community safety donation. The smell of corruption is thicker than the wood smoke drifting from my fireplace. This isn't harassment. This is organized crime. I'm staring at evidence of mail fraud, wire fraud, bribery of public officials, conspiracy to violate civil rights, and racketeering. A federal prosecutor's Christmas morning spread across my grandfather's kitchen table. Bryn isn't some power-drunk HOA president. She's the front woman for a criminal enterprise that's been systematically stealing lakefront properties across Montana, using HOA authority as cover for organized theft. The internal affairs complaint, the fake immigration raid, the death threat, those weren't random escalations by a neighborhood psycho. They were calculated attacks by people protecting a multi-million-dollar criminal operation, people who view my refusal to sell as an existential threat to their enterprise. But here's the beautiful irony that makes me laugh out loud in my empty kitchen. While they've been framing me as a corrupt federal agent, they've actually been committing textbook federal crimes under the nose of someone who's spent his entire career dismantling exactly these types of criminal conspiracies. Montana law requires full disclosure of board members' financial interests in enforcement actions. Bryn's failure to disclose her Pine Summit connections voids every violation, every fine, every legal threat she's issued. More importantly, it constitutes fraud under color of law, a federal crime with serious prison time. The power dynamic just flipped completely. Bryn thought she was hunting a helpless property owner who didn't know his rights. What she's actually been doing is building an airtight federal case against herself and her co-conspirators, one documented crime at a time. Time to show this criminal organization what happens when they mess with the wrong federal agent's family legacy. Sunday morning, I wake up with the kind of clarity that comes from finally seeing your enemy's throat exposed. Bryn wants to play organized crime with a federal agent? Time to show these amateurs what 30 years of dismantling criminal conspiracies looks like. My dining room transforms into a war room. Documents spread across the wooden table like battle plans, the morning sun streaming through windows and catching dust motes dancing over evidence that'll send a dozen people to federal prison. But I'm not just building a case, I'm engineering a public execution. See, criminals like Pine Summit survive by operating in shadows, using shell companies and bought officials to hide their crimes. They count on victims fighting isolated battles against overwhelming resources. What they never expect is someone who knows exactly how to coordinate a multi-agency takedown that destroys them in front of witnesses. The evidence organization alone would make a prosecutor weep with joy. I create what we call a documentary chain of custody. Every piece of evidence photographed with timestamps, GPS coordinates, and digital signatures that'll hold up in federal court. The smell of fresh printer ink fills the air as I compile financial records showing Pine Summit's bribery payments to county officials. But documents won't be enough. I need witnesses, allies, and irrefutable proof of active crimes caught in real time. That's where Mrs. Sterling becomes my nuclear weapon. Tuesday evening, she arrives at my door with a banker's box that sounds like rattling bones when she sets it on my kitchen table. 40 years as a research librarian taught me the importance of documentation, she says, lifting the lid to reveal hundreds of photographs, audio recordings, and meticulously organized correspondence. When criminals think they're untouchable, evidence becomes more valuable than gold. Her jasmine tea steams between us, the delicate scent mixing with wood smoke from my fireplace as we catalog a year's worth of harassment, threats, and criminal activity that Bryn never realized was being recorded. Jim Hartley brings military precision to our operation. Wednesday evening, he spreads reconnaissance photos across my coffee table, images captured by the informal surveillance network he's been building among fed-up neighbors. Classic insurgency tactics, he explains, pointing to timestamps showing Pine Summit vehicles casing properties before harassment campaigns begin. Document everything, build popular support, then wait for the enemy to overextend into a kill zone. The trap's design is elegant in its simplicity. We're giving Bryn exactly what she thinks she wants, a public forum to destroy my reputation and force community compliance. But instead of the friendly HOA meeting she's planning, she'll walk into a room packed with witnesses, media, and law enforcement. Thursday brings the technical preparation that separates amateurs from professionals. I position digital recording equipment throughout the community center, tested for optimal audio capture during what's about to become the most documented public meltdown in Montana history. The evidence presentation gets assembled like a federal courtroom display. Timeline boards tracking criminal activity, financial charts showing money flows, legal documents proving conspiracy charges. Everything designed for maximum visual impact when it's time to drop the legal hammer. Here's a trick I learned prosecuting financial crimes. Always control the narrative by controlling the evidence presentation. Create visual displays that even journalists can understand instantly, because media coverage amplifies your victory beyond the immediate target. Friday evening, the final pieces click into place with the precision of a Swiss watch. County Prosecutor Sarah Williams agrees to attend after reviewing preliminary evidence that makes her eyes light up like Christmas morning. This is the kind of corruption case that makes careers, she tells me over the phone. I'll bring investigators and have state backup standing by. Regional TV reporter Jake Morrison gets an anonymous tip about major federal crimes involving local development corruption. He'll arrive expecting routine community drama and discover the story that'll put him on the evening news in Helena. Most importantly, Montana Historical Society Director Rebecca Torres expedites official landmark designation for my cabin through contacts I've cultivated over 3 decades of federal service. The paperwork arrives by courier Friday evening, providing legal protection that trumps every zoning law and development scheme. Pine Summit ever conceived. Saturday morning, I'm sitting on my dock with coffee, listening to loons call across water that reflects clouds like broken mirrors. The rough wood of the dock planks feels solid under my palms. 4 generations of Blackwood hands have gripped these same rails while planning important decisions. The smell of pine pitch and morning mist carries something that feels like justice finally awakening. In 4 hours, Bryn Ashford and her criminal organization will walk into that community center expecting to celebrate their victory over a helpless property owner who doesn't understand his legal rights. Instead, they're about to discover they've been building an airtight federal case against themselves, one documented crime at a time. Time to show these criminals what happens when they declare war on the wrong federal agent's family legacy. The trap is set. The evidence is overwhelming. The witnesses are ready. Let the public destruction begin. Friday night, Bryn crosses the line from harassment into full-blown criminal desperation, and I catch every second on camera. I'm in my home office, organizing tomorrow's evidence presentation, when motion sensors around my property start pinging like a pinball machine. 3 sets of headlights creeping up my driveway at 10:47 p.m., moving with the careful stealth of people who shouldn't be there. Through night vision cameras, I watch Bryn step out of the lead vehicle wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low. She's accompanied by 2 men in coveralls, probably Pine Summit contractors hired for what's about to become her biggest mistake yet. The October air carries the sharp scent of frost and dying leaves as I slip out my back door, positioning myself in shadows where I can observe their criminal activity firsthand. 28 years of surveillance work taught me patience, and tonight that patience is about to pay federal dividends. Bryn's directing her accomplices toward my property boundaries, whispering instructions that my directional microphones are capturing with crystal clarity. They're carrying surveying equipment and what appears to be small construction tools. Plant the boundary markers 15 feet inside his property line, she hisses, voice tight with desperation. Tomorrow's survey will show he's been illegally expanding his lot for years. They're literally moving property boundaries in the middle of the night, creating fake evidence of land violations that'll support Pine Summit's legal challenges to my ownership. The brass coating on the fake survey stakes glints in moonlight as they hammer them into my grandfather's soil. But that's just the opening act of Bryn's criminal performance. While her hired help manufactures boundary disputes, she approaches my cabin with a crowbar and what looks like official county paperwork. The sound of splintering wood cuts through night silence as she pries open my storage shed, then plants documents inside. Through infrared scopes, I watch her place what appears to be falsified building permits and inspection reports, probably claiming my grandfather made unpermitted additions that violate current codes. She's manufacturing a paper trail to justify Pine Summit's condemnation proceedings, the methodical destruction of my family's legacy, captured in high-definition video that'll make federal prosecutors weep with joy. 25 minutes later, they're gone, leaving behind enough evidence to support felony charges of criminal mischief, conspiracy, and filing false documents. But I don't call it in yet, because tomorrow's trap requires Bryn to think her midnight crimes went undetected. Saturday morning dawns crisp and clear, the kind of Montana day that makes you grateful to witness justice served with mountain air. I'm sitting on my dock with coffee, watching early frost melt off the lake while reviewing camera footage of last night's criminal activity. The taste of victory mixes with dark roast as I upload encrypted video files to secure federal servers. Every frame is admissible evidence, every whispered instruction a nail in Pine Summit's legal coffin. By 10 a.m., cars start arriving at the community center. Bryn's supporters in their luxury vehicles chattering excitedly about finally dealing with the problem property. What they don't realize is that half the parking lot belongs to undercover law enforcement, federal agents, and journalists who smell career-making stories. I arrive precisely at noon, carrying a briefcase containing evidence that's about to redefine several criminal statutes. The autumn sun feels warm on my shoulders as I walk toward what Bryn believes is my public execution. Inside, she's transformed the community center into a courtroom designed for my destruction. Poster boards display enlarged photos of my cabin with red arrows pointing at manufactured violations, She's even prepared a PowerPoint presentation titled Protecting Whitefish Estates from Destructive Elements. The room buzzes with maybe 160 people, energy crackling like electricity before a thunderstorm. Bryn stands at the front podium in her pristine tennis outfit, practically radiating confidence as she adjusts her microphone. Marcus slips through the back entrance, scanning the crowd with the trained eyes of someone who senses danger. Our gazes meet across the packed room, and I watch recognition dawn in his expression. This isn't a routine neighborhood dispute anymore. County Prosecutor Sarah Williams occupies a third-row seat, flanked by investigators already taking notes. TV reporter Jake Morrison sets up his camera equipment, expecting community drama and about to capture the most spectacular confession in Montana legal history. Rebecca Torres from the Montana Historical Society sits quietly near the front, official landmark designation papers in her lap like a legal nuclear weapon. But the most satisfying sight is Sheriff's Deputy Rodriguez entering in dress uniform, the same officer who responded to Bryn's false reports, now here in official capacity to witness her public destruction. Bryn taps her microphone, feedback shrieking through speakers like a banshee's warning. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to address the threats facing our community. She has no idea she's about to confess to multiple federal crimes in front of cameras, law enforcement, and 200 witnesses. Bryn starts her presentation like she's delivering a TED Talk on community improvement, completely oblivious to the legal execution squad sitting in her audience. We're here today because one individual's selfish refusal to embrace community standards threatens everything we've built in Whitefish Estates, she begins, clicking to a slide showing my cabin circled in angry red. Agent Blackwood's property represents everything wrong with unchecked federal government overreach. The crowd murmurs approval, but I notice Marcus shifting uncomfortably in his seat. His wife just publicly accused his supervisor of federal crimes, and the implications are starting to sink in. Bryn's confidence builds as she clicks through slides showing manufactured violations, fake survey markers, and the falsified documents she planted in my storage shed just 12 hours ago. She has no idea every piece of evidence she's presenting was captured on video as she committed the crimes to create it. These inspection reports, discovered just yesterday, prove systematic violations dating back years, she declares, holding up documents with ink so fresh you can probably still smell it. Unpermitted additions, illegal boundary expansions, environmental hazards. This property is a cancer threatening our entire community. That's when County Prosecutor Williams stands up, and the temperature in the room drops 10 degrees. Mrs. Ashford, could you explain how those inspection reports were discovered on private property without a warrant or owner consent? Bryn's smile falters like a flickering light bulb. The documents were found during a routine community safety inspection. Conducted by whom? At what time? With what legal authority? The silence stretches taut as piano wire. Bryn's mouth opens and closes like a fish drowning in air, realizing she just confessed to breaking and entering in front of 200 witnesses. But here's where her desperation leads to complete self-destruction. Instead of stopping, she doubles down. Agent Blackwood has been using his federal position to intimidate residents and obstruct legitimate community oversight, she shrieks, spittle flying from her lips. He's threatened me, harassed my family, and abused his FBI authority to avoid accountability. Marcus goes white as fresh snow. His wife just publicly accused his supervisor of the exact crimes the Internal Affairs investigation cleared him of yesterday. The investigation that found the anonymous complaint contained fabricated evidence and falsified witness statements. That's when I stand up, briefcase in hand, and the real show begins. Mrs. Ashford, since you've made public accusations of federal crimes, perhaps we should examine the evidence supporting those claims. I walk to the front of the room while pulling out a tablet connected to the projection system. The first video starts playing. High-definition footage of Bryn and her accomplices planting fake survey markers on my property at 10:47 p.m. last night. Gasps echo through the community center as the crowd watches their HOA president committing criminal mischief in real time, her whispered instructions crystal clear through directional microphones. "This is doctored!" Bryn screams, but her voice cracks like breaking glass. "He's a federal agent. He can fake anything." I click to the next video. Bryn breaking into my storage shed and planting the same inspection reports she just presented as legitimate evidence. The timestamp shows 11:23 p.m., and her face is clearly visible in infrared illumination. Federal agents don't fake evidence, Mrs. Ashford. We collect it legally and present it accurately. The crowd's murmur turns hostile, but not against me. They're staring at Bryn like she's a poisonous snake that just shed its disguise. Sheriff's Deputy Rodriguez stands up, hand resting on his handcuffs. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent. That's when Bryn completely loses her mind. You can't arrest me. My husband is FBI. Marcus, tell them you'll protect me. All eyes turn to Marcus, who looks like he wants to disappear through the floorboards. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of 20 years in law enforcement. Ma'am, if you've committed crimes, your relationship to me doesn't grant immunity. I took an oath to uphold the law, not obstruct it. The betrayal hits Bryn like a physical blow. Her husband, the FBI connection she's been bragging about, just publicly refused to protect her from the consequences of her criminal actions. I've given my life to this community, she shrieks, mascara streaming down her face in black rivers. I've protected property values. I've maintained standards. And this is how you repay me? But the community center has turned into a courtroom, and the jury's verdict is written on 200 disgusted faces. These people trusted her with their neighborhood's future, and she used that trust to commit crimes for personal profit. Pine Summit Development Representative James Wheeler tries to slip out the back door, but TV reporter Morrison blocks his path with cameras rolling. Mr. Wheeler, can you comment on your company's relationship with Mrs. Ashford and the alleged bribery of county officials? The trap isn't just catching Bryn anymore. It's pulling in the entire criminal conspiracy. The community center erupts into chaos as Bryn's world collapses in real time, and I get front row seats to the most satisfying meltdown in Montana legal history. This is a setup, she screams, pointing at me with a trembling finger. He's been planning this for months, using federal resources to destroy innocent citizens. County Prosecutor Williams steps forward with a smile sharp enough to cut diamond. Mrs. Ashford, are you confessing to knowledge of a premeditated conspiracy? Because that would make you an accessory to federal crimes. The legal noose tightens with every word Bryn speaks, but she's too deep in panic to recognize she's hanging herself with her own testimony. That's when I drop the nuclear bomb that vaporizes any remaining doubt about Pine Summit's criminal enterprise. Ladies and gentlemen, let me show you why Mrs. Ashford was so desperate to force property sales in our community. I click to financial records showing wire transfers between Pine Summit Development and county officials. The numbers glow on the projection screen like evidence of corruption written in neon. $15,000 to Planning Director Morrison for expedited permit approval. $25,000 to Tax Assessor Johnson for consultation services that mysteriously coincided with 300% property tax increases for targeted homeowners. Gasps ripple through the crowd as neighbors realize they've been victims of organized crime disguised as community improvement. $50,000 to the Sheriff's Department, donated conveniently before Mrs. Ashford began filing false police reports against residents who refused to sell. Sheriff's Deputy Rodriguez goes pale as he realizes his department unknowingly aided a criminal conspiracy. The donated patrol cars outside suddenly feel like evidence of corruption rather than community support. But the most damning evidence comes next. Audio recordings of Bryn coordinating with Pine Summit representatives to target specific families for harassment. We need the Sterling property first, Bryn's voice crackles through speakers. Old woman, easy target. Immigration scare should work perfectly. Mrs. Sterling stands up in the audience, tears streaming down her face, but voice steady as granite. 83 years old, American citizen for 40 years, and you terrorized me with fake federal agents because of my race. The crowd's anger shifts into something darker, moral outrage at systematic targeting of elderly and minority residents. These people trusted Bryn to represent their community, and she used that trust to commit hate crimes. Pine Summit Representative Wheeler tries one last desperate play, stepping forward with his hands raised like he's calming dangerous animals. Ladies and gentlemen, there's been a misunderstanding. Mrs. Ashford operated independently without company knowledge or authorization. I cut him off with the final piece of evidence, bank records showing Pine Summit payments directly to Bryn's personal account totaling $47,000 over 18 months. Mr. Wheeler, are you claiming your company accidentally paid Mrs. Ashford almost $50,000 for community consultation while she simultaneously harassed property owners you needed to acquire? Wheeler's mouth opens and closes without sound. He just realized every word he speaks might be used against him in federal court. That's when Montana Historical Society Director Rebecca Torres stands up, holding official documents like a legal sword. By authority of the Montana Heritage Preservation Act, the Blackwood family cabin is hereby designated a protected historical landmark, immune from all development pressures, zoning changes, and HOA regulations in perpetuity. The crowd erupts in applause that sounds like thunder rolling across the lake. My grandfather's legacy is officially protected forever, and Pine Summit's $50 million development just died in front of 200 witnesses. But Bryn isn't finished destroying herself yet. "You think you've won?" she shrieks, voice breaking with hysteria. "I have connections you can't imagine, people who make federal agents disappear. This isn't over." Sheriff's Deputy Rodriguez clicks handcuffs around her wrists with the satisfaction of someone finally arresting the right person. "Ma'am, threatening federal agents is a felony. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use it." As they lead her out in handcuffs, Bryn's final words echo through the community center. "Marcus, don't let them do this to me. I'm your wife." Marcus stands up slowly, FBI badge visible on his jacket, voice carrying across the silent room with absolute authority. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, bribery, and civil rights violations. Your relationship to me ends where federal law begins." The crowd gives Marcus a standing ovation for choosing justice over personal loyalty. Even in this nightmare, he's maintaining the integrity that makes good federal agents. TV reporter Morrison captures everything for the evening news: the confession, the evidence, the arrests, and the community's overwhelming support for justice over corruption. As Pine Summit executives are led away in handcuffs and neighbors celebrate the exposure of the conspiracy that nearly destroyed their community, I realize something beautiful. My grandfather's cabin didn't just survive their attack. It became the rock that shattered their entire criminal enterprise. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my dock watching the sunrise paint Whitefish Lake gold, and the silence is absolutely perfect. No HOA harassment, no criminal conspiracies, no development schemes threatening my family's legacy, just the sound of loons calling across water that reflects Montana sky like a mirror made of dreams. The criminal trials wrapped up faster than anyone expected, mainly because Bryn and her conspirators kept confessing to additional crimes during their testimony. Turns out, when you build a criminal enterprise on lies and intimidation, it crumbles pretty quickly under legal pressure. Bryn got 8 years federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and civil rights violations. Pine Summit Development ceased operations after paying $2.3 million in fines and restitution to victims. County Planning Director Morrison resigned in disgrace and lost his pension. But the real victory isn't the criminals getting justice, it's what rose from the ashes of their corruption. The Whitefish Heritage Foundation, established using Pine Summit's restitution payments, has become something my grandfather would have loved. We award annual scholarships to local students studying Montana history, fund educational programs about property rights and HOA governance, and support families facing housing harassment. Mrs. Sterling received the Foundation's first Community Service Award for her meticulous documentation that helped expose the conspiracy. She's now teaching classes on citizen investigation techniques that draw attendees from across the state. Jim Hartley used his military experience to develop a property owner's defense toolkit that's been adopted by communities in 12 states. Turns out, rural veterans have zero tolerance for HOA dictators and unlimited patience for organized resistance. The annual Whitefish Heritage Festival happens every September on my property, celebrating the area's logging and ranching history. Families bring homemade food, local musicians perform on a stage built beside my grandfather's workshop, and kids learn traditional Montana crafts from elders who remember when the lake was surrounded by working ranches instead of vacation homes. Marcus and I rebuilt our professional relationship stronger than before. He earned a commendation for maintaining ethical standards under impossible personal circumstances. We never discuss his ex-wife. She became a cautionary tale about what happens when people choose crime over character. My cabin got more than historical protection. It became a symbol of what ordinary people can accomplish when they refuse to surrender family legacy to corporate greed. The restoration, funded by preservation grants, returned it to the rustic beauty my grandfather intended while adding modern safety features that satisfy even the most paranoid building inspectors. The smell of fresh pine stain and wood smoke still greets visitors, but now it mixes with the sounds of children's laughter and community conversations. This place was meant to bring people together, not divide them with manufactured conflicts. Property values in Whitefish Estates actually increased after Pine Summit's corruption was exposed. Turns out, communities thrive when they're based on mutual respect rather than systematic harassment. The new neighborhood association operates with transparent bylaws, published budgets, and quarterly meetings where actual residents, not development companies, make decisions about their community's future. But the most satisfying outcome happens every morning when I walk down to my dock with coffee and see Mrs. Sterling tending her expanded vegetable garden, Jim's American flag flying proudly at regulation height, and the Morrison kids playing on swings that nobody will ever call violations again. This morning, sipping coffee that tastes like freedom and watching eagles hunt over water my great-grandfather fished, I realized something profound. Protecting family legacy isn't about preserving the past. It's about creating a future worthy of the sacrifices previous generations made. My phone buzzes with a text from a homeowner in Colorado. HOA threatening foreclosure over flower garden. Heard you might have advice. Help? I smile, already planning my response. Because the beautiful thing about defeating one criminal conspiracy is that it teaches you exactly how to dismantle the next one. The loons call across the lake, their voices carrying across water that's run clear for 1,000 generations and will run clear for 1,000 more. Protected now not just by law, but by a community that learned the difference between authority and tyranny.